It's time for some more You Comment, We Respond. The first hand was very special because we actually had Daniel Negreanu join us afterwards to talk about the hand that we had just analyzed. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
That hand was called Daniel Negreanu Joins the Poker Guys to break down a classic hand. Click right up there to check it out. What happened in the hand was amateur Angel Shlomi like 95x to pre-flop with kings. Daniel called on the button with 9-10 of diamonds. The flop was 9-5-4 with 2 spades. It went pot size bet. Daniel calls. The turn was what? What was the turn?
It was a queen.
Queen of hearts.
Yep.
Shlomi bet again, but much smaller, less than half the pot. Daniel called again with some nefarious intentions. The river came a 6.
8 of clubs.
8 of clubs, that's what I meant. Completing 6-7 and Jack-10 as straights. Shlomi checked. No, Shlomi bet very small. I figured it out. A third of the pot. And Daniel decided, I can get this guy to fold. I can make him fold. So he raised a lot and Shlomi folded.
Yep. He told me he had aces or kings too. That probably helped. Here's what people had to say.
All right.
Can't pay rent says,
that's too bad.
wow, 2010 was pretty crazy. It's obviously easy to tell in hindsight, but it just seems so obvious that it's a bluff, especially when he declares that he knows we have kings. His bet puts pressure on a one-pair hand, so why would he bet enough to fold out a one-pair hand if he had us beat? Great play, but it just seems obvious with the advantage of hindsight.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, but the thing that's great about Daniel is that he knows a lot of the time what level the amateurs he's playing against are on. So he knows none of that matters. Shlomi, he knows how to get into Shlomi's head and what's going to get the result that he wants, and he has to only go first level here. He has to say, I know what you have, I know it's a good hand, why would I raise if I didn't have a better hand?
Right, and also I'm going to raise enough so you really can't consider calling with one pair because that's as far as your thought process is going to go.
Right, which, I mean, it makes sense. I know a lot of players who are very good players who get caught up in their own thought process and think that their opponents are playing in that same way and having that same thought process, but that's just not always the case. You have to properly level your opponent, and that's what Daniel did here.
He's good at that.
Yeah, he really is.
Matt Plews says, I really enjoyed this video and love hearing Daniel's opinion.
Thank you.
We enjoyed it too.
Yeah, it was cool.
I don't understand how Daniel can say that if he hits his 2-pair or trips that he's going to get a big payday, but then he raises the river as a bluff trying to get him to fold. Can't have it both ways. If he had hit 2-pair or trips, he wouldn't have won any more money than he did? Question mark. So I want to start with this.
All right.
So I think it depends. So if he hits 2-pair, he can raise if he wants to and probably end up folding the guy out, although he might size it differently like we were just saying.
Yeah.
To try and get a call from kings. It may work, it may not.
He would be exploitative with his sizing.
But I think the bigger point that Daniel's really looking for, or card he's looking for, is trips. So if he hits trip 9s, probably Shlomi will check. Daniel can bet big expecting to get called by pocket kings or pocket aces.
Yeah.
And that's where he can get paid off. I think that's Daniel's thought process there. But
also
knowing he's going to bluff almost always on the river if Shlomi bets small on the river.
Of course. I like your first point too, though, that Daniel would probably size it differently if he really did get there and Shlomi bet. Because Daniel, as I said, is only going to have to think on level 2 to get the level 1 guy to do what he wants. So he's going to be like, okay, I'm going to min raise with this hand because this guy can't get away from it when I min raise. Whereas when I want him to fold, I bet bigger. I know that's all very terrible in poker terms, but Daniel knows where this guy's head is.
As long as you know where your opponent is, you don't have to do anything special. You just move one step above and play right from there, and it's easy. Our second hand is Battle of the Chip Leaders, where Jonathan Jaffe opened with ace-5 of diamonds under the gun. They were 6-handed, I believe, at a World Series of Poker final table. Pierre Milan, who was the chip leader, was in the big blind with ace-king. He 3-bet. Jaffe called. The flop was ace-jack-4. I think it was a rainbow.
Yeah.
Milan continued, and Jaffe called. The turn was a queen, and it went check-check, interestingly. The river was yet another queen. Milan bet. Jaffe raised as a bluff.
Super cool bluff.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And Milan figured it out and made the call.
If you want to see the breakdown, click up there.
That's the place to look every time, right up there. All right, here's what some of the folks said. Hank Peter Huttema said, if ace-king is the bottom of Milan's value range, then that is seriously the only hand Jaffe is trying to get to fold. Jaffe himself blocks ace-king, and as we see in the video, ace-king might even call sometimes. Therefore, I am not the biggest fan of this bluff. I like your analysis, but I just don't think this bluff is as above the rim as you guys said. And this was actually the most liked comment out of all of the comments on this video with 13 likes.
Well, that's a lot of likes.
It really is.
Congratulations on your likes.
It's kind of a good point, though, too.
It is, but I think Jaffe knew that Milan had ace-king.
Yeah.
We kind of came to that conclusion that Jaffe really put Milan on ace-king. We don't think Milan has too many bluffs here, but if he does, then it's just a just-in-case raise from Jaffe anyway, so it doesn't matter. Milan doesn't really have any queens in his range, we came to the conclusion of. It's very hard for him to have queens in his range.
Yeah.
He has to have a 3-betting king-queen suited hand, which seems unlikely against a second chip leader. So it looks a lot like exactly ace-king because he probably wouldn't bet his ace chops. So Jaffe knows he has to bluff to get Milan off of that. And it's a tough spot because Jaffe does rep trip queens pretty well here.
He really does.
And I understand that Milan has his best bluff catcher. That doesn't mean you always bluff catch.
That's correct too. If sometimes the range of your opponent is almost all value, and so it doesn't matter.
Right, because what bluffs does Jaffe have here besides this crazy, I'm turning my ace into a bluff hand, which you don't expect?
Well, actually, there was a lot of speculation on that as well in the comments.
Oh, yeah?
I think this next comment may
All right,
address
that's
that.
exciting.
Cameron Price says, you expect Jaffe to bet all his bluffs on the turn, but why? It's perfectly reasonable to play some of your hands like sevens, which have some showdown value. Not much really, I know. But if you turn all your floats into bluffs on the turn, you're going to have way too many, considering you want to check back a lot of your value hands like ace-x, jack-x, king-queen, queen-10. These weak hands are perfect to turn into bluffs on the river. And your weak ace-x hands are hands you want to let go as you're blocking the exact type of hands you want to fold. While it's cool that Jaffe essentially read the hand exactly right, it looks like he might be bluffing way too much in this spot to make me, making ace-king a crying call.
Well, maybe he is bluffing way too much in this spot because that's the only justification for Milan actually calling here.
Right.
So maybe you're right about that. I'm not sure I agree that he should be checking back his bluffs on the turn too often because if Milan decides to check the river, it's going to be so hard to get him to fold. So if we're going to actually have this plan of floating with a pretty bad hand on the flop, it's too ambitious to think that Milan's never going to go check, check, and then call all rivers.
I mean, the thing that's interesting to me about this is, and this is something a lot of people were speculating, is sort of what other bluffs does Jaffe reasonably have here?
Yeah.
And people were saying, since he can turn a pair of aces into a bluff, certainly could turn a pair of jacks into a bluff too. So like King Jack, Jack 10, hands like that can also be bluffs, and then that adds a lot more bluff combos back into his range.
That's a pretty good point.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good point. And maybe Jaffe is weighted towards bluff just as a player in general, and Milan recognized that.
Maybe. Even so, it's a tough call when this is sort of the very bottom of your value range and you're betting. And we block like some of the bluffs even, it seems like, right? With the king and the ace. I don't know. I don't know if it's a good play.
I don't know if it's a good play. I don't know if Jaffe's play is really the best, most optimal play ever. I just know that it's super cool. It's like super cool.
I would think it's going to work most of the time,
yeah,
too.
It really would. The final hand is Phil Ivey faces a house-sized bet, and by that we don't mean that the chips were really big like a house. We mean you could buy a house in some cities for the $300,000 that the bet was.
If they were all $1 chips, though,
then we might be talking about a house-sized bet, a small house probably.
Well, I'm not sure.
We'll have to get.
We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. It's gonna be a different video. Click right up here.
It's gonna happen. Anyway, what happened is Phil Ivey opened with 6-3 of clubs, and Zygmunt just called with 2 jacks in a multi-way pot. The flop was Jack 10 deuce.
Jack 10 4.
Jack 10 4 with 2 clubs, giving Ivey a flush draw and Zygmunt top set. Zygmunt check raised when Ivey bet. Ivey called. The turn gave Ivey a gut shot to go with his flush draw. It was the deuce of spades. So Zygmunt bet again. He bet pretty big, but Ivey decided to call.
Yep.
The river was the 10 pairing the board that was also a club, giving Ivey a flush. Zygmunt went all in for a house, 300K, which was about twice the pot. Ivey tanked for a while and was sad and folded.
Yep. That's exactly
Click
what
right
happened.
up there to check it out.
Fabio Gaucho says, in a vacuum, the all-in is bad for the reasons stated. However, if you are a known maniac like Zygmunt, you have to consistently make huge bets both with your bluffs and big hands. Besides throwing people off because of your image and inducing some bad calls, the fact that you get called less but get paid more pays off, or at least evens out in the end. Of course, Phil Galfond should not make this play.
Huh, interesting. Well, we'd have to know the math on how often Zygmunt gets called and all of that to figure out if it's actually a plus EV play.
Yeah.
Something that I was speculating was Zygmunt might be trying to represent being drunk because he often would drink at the table in these days at least and sometimes play crazy and make huge bluffs. So I think it really matters whether or not he was drinking at the time.
Something that some of the folks said in the comments was that Zygmunt later said he didn't mean to bet as much as he did, and he didn't realize he had as much as he did.
Oh, really?
And if he knew he had 300,000, he would have bet 100,000, which makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, he might have gotten called then, but he still might have gotten a fold out of Ivey.
I think he gets a fold anyway, actually, when he bets anything truly significant, and Ivey has sort of the absolute bottom of what is any reasonable calling range, right? Like, what does Zygmunt have there? Anyway, Gabriel Rockman says, I think Ivey's play before the flop, on the flop, and on the turn were all bad plays.
Ouch.
Well. We
Gabriel
got someone.
Rockman feels like Phil Ivey is playing bad.
It's great.
Yeah.
Finally, someone puts down Phil Ivey.
We did it once. We made a video called Phil Ivey Makes a Huge Mistake.
That's true, and we got killed for it.
Yeah, we were right, though.
Anyway, he says, 6-3 suited should fold pre-flop. 6-3 suited should check the flop because it's unlikely to get the other 3 players to fold, because if it gets raised, it is probably behind, either to a made hand or a better draw, and should be folding to a raise. 6-3 should fold the turn because there's a fairly small number of outs in the best case situation that he's not up against a better flush draw, and if he's up against a better flush draw, then he's probably going to lose a lot of money. I think Ivey's fold on the river was the only good move that he made in this hand.
Well, I think I kind of agree with the turn. Like, we're speculating on the turn that maybe Ivey could find a fold there because it was a pretty big bet.
Yeah, maybe.
So it's possible. But other than that, I think it's fine to play it the way Ivey did. I mean, it's not a good flush draw, but you can't just go folding it on the flop. I know you didn't want to bet the flop. Fair enough, there's 3 players, but you also want to build equity and win bigger pots sometimes.
Right. I mean, if you don't bet, you don't build up the pot. So then when you get there, you can't make a big bet, and it'll be too obvious. If you bet 3 times the pot, look what happened with Zygmunt, right?
Right.
That's one of the reasons why you build a pot, is so when you bet the river, it looks reasonable, and people may feel like they have to call, right?
Right. To be fair, you are always going to sometimes, well, not always. Sometimes you're going to put yourself in a tough spot when you open 6-3 suited pre-flop, but it's Phil Ivey, right? I mean, you got to understand this guy can figure it out as he goes. And he did lose some money in this pot, but he definitely didn't lose all of it.
Yeah, some people will go broke here for sure. Yeah. Although I think most good players would fold.
Yeah, most good players will.
When Zygmunt goes all in, I think it's a fold for almost everybody.
Right.
I actually think Phil Ivey played the hand fine all the way through. I think it's fine for him to open, as Grant's saying. I don't see how he can fold just to a check raise on this flop. By the way, he picks up more equity on the turn with a straight draw as well. I just don't know how he's supposed to fold there. I think it's a reasonable call when he's in position, too.
It's Phil Ivey.
Yeah.
He's good.